The ice clinked against the glass as Marcus Washington set down his briefcase and approached the polished mahogany bar. At 34, he carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from building a tech empire from nothing. His tailored navy suit spoke of success, though he'd deliberately chosen something understated for tonight's business meeting. The Copper Crown had a reputation as the city's premier networking spot, where million-dollar deals were sealed over single malt whiskey. Behind the bar, Trevor Sullivan barely glanced up from his phone. The 26-year-old bartender had worked here for 3 years, cultivating an attitude that matched his carefully groomed beard and vintage suspenders. He prided himself on knowing exactly which customers deserved his attention and which ones didn't belong in his establishment. Marcus settled onto a leather bar stool and checked his watch. His potential investor would arrive in 20 minutes, and he wanted to secure a quiet corner table where they could discuss the expansion of his cybersecurity firm. The meeting could change everything, potentially bringing in the $15 million in funding he needed to compete with the industry giants. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, waiting for Trevor to acknowledge him. Trevor continued scrolling through his phone, deliberately ignoring the request. Other patrons at the bar received immediate attention, their glasses refilled before they even asked. But Marcus remained invisible, a ghost in expensive clothing. After 5 full minutes of being ignored, Marcus tried again. "Could I get a menu, please?" This time, Trevor looked up, his eyes conducting a dismissive assessment from Marcus's polished shoes to his perfectly knotted tie. "We're pretty busy tonight," he said with practiced indifference. "You might want to try somewhere more your speed. There's a sports bar down the street." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with conversations about stock options and real estate investments. White executives in similar suits received warm greetings and premium service, their every need anticipated before being voiced. Marcus felt the familiar weight of a moment that would define how the evening proceeded. He could leave quietly, avoiding confrontation and protecting his business meeting, or he could stand his ground, knowing that doing so might cost him more than just his dignity. "I'll wait," Marcus replied calmly, placing his hands flat on the bar. "I have a business meeting here in 15 minutes. Trevor's expression hardened. "Look, I'm trying to be nice about this. This place has a certain clientele, you know? People who understand the atmosphere we maintain here. Maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere that caters to your type." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Marcus had heard variations of this rejection countless times throughout his career, from venture capital firms that questioned his technical expertise to country clubs that somehow never had available memberships. Each incident had been a masterclass in polite discrimination, wrapped in corporate courtesy and plausible deniability. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Marcus wasn't just a customer seeking service. He was a successful entrepreneur who had earned his place at this bar through years of 18-hour workdays and strategic brilliance that had attracted the attention of Fortune 500 companies. "What type would that be?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Trevor's smile never wavered, though his eyes revealed the calculation happening behind them. "You know, people who are familiar with our pricing structure, our cheapest cocktail is $28, and most of our customers order bottles that cost more than some people make in a week." The implication was clear, without being explicitly stated. Marcus couldn't possibly afford to drink here, and his presence would somehow diminish the establishment's carefully cultivated exclusivity. From his briefcase, Marcus withdrew a platinum credit card and placed it on the bar with deliberate precision. "I'll take your most expensive whiskey." A double. Trevor hesitated, clearly not expecting this response. Around them, other customers had begun to notice the tension, conversations dropping to whispers as they observed the unfolding drama. The restaurant's general manager, Patricia Chen, emerged from the kitchen and surveyed the scene with growing concern. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, approaching the bar with the cautious steps of someone who recognized potential legal liability. "No problem at all," Trevor replied quickly. "I was just explaining our reservation policy to this gentleman." Marcus turned to face Patricia, noting how her expression immediately shifted when she saw his business attire and obvious affluence. "I don't have a reservation, but I was hoping to secure a table for a business meeting. I'm willing to pay whatever premium is necessary." Patricia's eyes darted between Marcus and Trevor, recognizing the delicate situation that could explode into a public relations nightmare. The Copper Crown's reputation depended on discretion and exclusivity, not discrimination scandals that could trend on social media within hours. "Of course, sir," she said with professional warmth. "Let me see what we have available." But Trevor wasn't finished. "Patricia, I already told him we don't have anything suitable tonight. Maybe he should make a reservation for next week." The general manager's face flushed with embarrassment as she realized what had transpired. Her bartender had just refused service to a clearly successful businessman, based on assumptions that could destroy everything she'd worked to build at this establishment. Marcus watched the internal struggle play out across Patricia's features. She understood the gravity of the situation, but also had to manage her staff and maintain the delicate balance that kept her wealthy clientele comfortable. "Trevor," she said carefully, "why don't you take your break now?" "I'm fine right here," Trevor replied, his defiance growing stronger with each passing moment. "Someone has to maintain standards. Dim." The word standards echoed through the immediate vicinity, causing nearby conversations to halt entirely. Marcus felt every eye in the restaurant turn toward their confrontation, the weight of collective attention pressing down on his shoulders. In that moment of suspended tension, Marcus made a decision that would change not just his evening, but the trajectory of everyone involved. He pulled out his phone and began typing, his fingers moving with the precision of someone who had built an empire through strategic communications. The message was simple but powerful, sent to a contact he rarely needed to use. The response came back within 30 seconds, a single word that would soon reshape the entire dynamic of the Copper Crown. The notification sound from Marcus's phone cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a knife through silk. He glanced at the screen, noting the confirmation he'd been waiting for, then slipped the device back into his jacket pocket with deliberate slowness. "Actually," Marcus said, addressing Patricia directly, while Trevor stood frozen beside them, "I think there's been a misunderstanding about who I am." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a leather portfolio, opening it to reveal documents that immediately caught Patricia's attention. Her eyes widened as she scanned the letterhead of Washington Cybersecurity Solutions, followed by financial statements that showed quarterly revenues exceeding most small countries' budgets. "I'm Marcus Washington," he continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to raise it to command respect. "Perhaps you've heard of my company. We provide security consulting for several Fortune 100 corporations." Patricia's professional smile faltered as recognition dawned. Washington's cybersecurity had been featured in Forbes 3 times in the past year, and their CEO's face had graced the cover of Tech Innovator magazine just last month. She was looking at one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs, a man whose net worth exceeded the annual revenue of most established businesses. Trevor, however, remained unmoved by the revelation. "I don't care if you're Bill Gates," he said with increasing boldness. "Rules are rules, and this establishment maintains certain expectations." The audacity of the statement caused several nearby patrons to turn completely in their chairs. A well-dressed woman at table 12 pulled out her phone and began recording, recognizing the potential viral moment unfolding before her eyes. Marcus studied Trevor with the analytical gaze that had helped him identify security vulnerabilities in complex corporate networks. Here was a man so committed to his prejudices that even confronted with evidence of his error, he doubled down rather than retreat. "What expectations would those be?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious about how far Trevor would take his discrimination. "Look around you," Trevor gestured broadly at the restaurant's other customers. "Everyone here understands the culture we've built. They appreciate fine things. They speak the language of success, and they don't need to wave around credit cards to prove they belong." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that he was being lectured about success by a bartender whose annual salary probably equaled what Marcus spent on a single business dinner. But more than irony, he felt a familiar sadness at witnessing someone so thoroughly trapped by their own limitations. Patricia intervened before the situation could deteriorate further. "Trevor, please step away from the bar immediately." "Sir, I sincerely apologize for this treatment. Let me personally ensure you have everything you need for your business meeting." But Marcus raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Actually, I'm curious to hear more about these expectations Trevor mentioned. As a business owner myself, I'm always interested in learning about different operational philosophies." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Trevor, emboldened by what he perceived as support from his regular customers, decided to elaborate on his worldview. "This place represents excellence," he said, polishing a glass with theatrical precision. "We cater to people who've earned their place through hard work and dedication. Old money, established families, entrepreneurs who built their success the right way." "The right way," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. "And what would the wrong way be?" Trevor's eyes gleamed with the confidence of someone who believed he was speaking truth to power. "Affirmative action programs, diversity quotas, government handouts. Some people get ahead through merit, others through shortcuts." The restaurant had fallen completely silent now. Even the soft jazz music seemed muted as every patron strained to hear the conversation unfolding at the bar. Patricia looked mortified, recognizing that her employee was digging a grave deep enough to bury her entire establishment. Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering Trevor's perspective with genuine interest. "That's fascinating. Tell me, how do you determine which category someone falls into just by looking at them?" "Experience," Trevor replied confidently. "You develop an eye for these things after working in hospitality long enough. You can tell who's earned their success and who's just playing dress-up." "And your assessment of me?" Trevor's smile carried the cruel satisfaction of someone delivering what he believed to be a devastating truth. "With all due respect, sir, successful people don't need to prove themselves to bartenders. They carry their accomplishments with quiet dignity. Real wealth whispers. It doesn't shout." The psychological projection was breathtaking in its completeness. Trevor, who had spent the entire interaction loudly proclaiming his authority to judge others, was now lecturing Marcus about the quiet dignity of true success. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time, the message contained information that would soon transform the evening from uncomfortable confrontation to complete reversal of fortune. He read it quickly, then looked up at Trevor with something approaching pity. "You know what's interesting about your theory," Marcus said, his tone conversational despite the electric tension surrounding them. "It assumes that success always looks the same, sounds the same, and comes from the same places." He stood from his bar stool, his full height commanding attention from every corner of the restaurant. "I built my first computer from scrap parts when I was 12 years old. By 16, I was consulting for local businesses on network security. I put myself through MIT working 3 jobs, graduated summa cum laude, and founded my company in a studio apartment with $500 in savings." Trevor's confidence began to waver as Marcus continued his quiet recitation of achievements that dwarfed anything the bartender could claim. "Last year, my company prevented cyber attacks that could have cost our clients over $2 billion in damages. We employ 437 people across 6 countries, and our annual revenue exceeds what this restaurant makes in a decade." Patricia had gone completely pale, recognizing that her establishment was now facing a public relations catastrophe that could end careers and close businesses. But Marcus wasn't finished. He reached into his briefcase once more, withdrawing a document that would change everything. 2 weeks later, the brass nameplate outside the copper crown had been replaced. The Washington Group now owned the premier networking establishment, having acquired it through a private equity firm that specialized in hospitality investments. Marcus stood behind the same mahogany bar where Trevor had once held court, reviewing employment applications with Patricia, who had gratefully accepted his offer to stay on as general manager under new ownership. The transformation had been swift but thorough. New policies emphasized respectful service to all patrons regardless of appearance or background. Staff underwent comprehensive diversity training, and the establishment's culture shifted from exclusivity based on assumptions to excellence based on character. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that Trevor's own prejudices had delivered him exactly what he claimed to protect against: a change in ownership that truly altered the establishment's fundamental character. Business had never been better. Word spread quickly through the city's professional networks about the new ownership and inclusive atmosphere. The restaurant attracted a broader clientele of successful individuals who appreciated being judged by their character rather than their appearance. Marcus had proven that respect and profitability weren't mutually exclusive, that true excellence welcomed talent from every background. Sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger or arguments, but simply the quiet demonstration of what success actually looks like. In a world where assumptions can limit opportunities, Marcus Washington had shown that those limitations only apply to people who accept them. The copper crown now served everyone who earned their seat through merit, regardless of how that merit was packaged.